75 years of existence of UNESCO, that is the United Nations Education, Scientific and Cultural Organization. This was officially launched in the year 1945, shortly after the Second World War, where it was agreed that wars are manufactured, are originate in the minds of people. So how do you create peace in the minds of people? And today, being the 16th of November, makes it exactly 75 years of existence of UNESCO. And in Uganda, we began just after immediately after independence. We became a member state of UNESCO, and a year later we established, that is the National Commission for UNESCO in Uganda. And with me today this morning to discuss more on achievements and challenges of UNESCO in Uganda is the board chairperson of the Uganda National Commission of UNESCO, that is Dr. Eliabu Lugujo. Doctor, you're most welcome.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes, okay.
Thank
you very much.
On my other extreme end is Dr. Dominic Mundurugo Ago Alila, who is also the Assistant Secretary General of UNESCO in Uganda.
Good morning. Thank you. You're most welcome, and we are glad to be here on this occasion.
I'll begin with Professor Eliabu. Professor, when we talk about UNESCO, 75 years is a milestone of existence, but we also want to look at achievements. But even before that, help us understand more when we refer to the UNESCO Commission in Uganda.
Thank you very much. Under the Constitution of UNESCO, every member state must have a national commission through which UNESCO transacts its business. The National Commission essentially interacts with the grassroots, finds the needs, does needs assessment, convolutes all that into project form, which projects we present to UNESCO for support. Therefore, it is incumbent upon every member state of UNESCO to have a national commission. And it is this national commission which has specialized programs of UNESCO. And it is constituted by individuals in education, in natural sciences, in social and human sciences, in culture, in communication and information. Those are the people within this country who come together and constitute the commission, or they become members of the commission. And then they have a board for which I am a chair now. And then we do the business of UNESCO within Uganda.
Dr. Dominic, let's also understand what are the pillars of UNESCO, the aims of UNESCO, as then we shall be able to understand better if there are achievements that we can boast of or be proud of as we mark 75 years.
Thank you very much. In terms of pillars, we have, let's say the structural arrangement is such that we have the executive board, but above that there is a General Assembly. The General Assembly is the overall decision making and is constituted by member states delegations. Right now what is happening is that the session is going on. Every country has a permanent delegation to UNESCO and they represent the country on the General Assembly. And then also there is the executive board. Now the executive board is elected by the member states sitting at a general conference. So that is like the executive, if you will compare with the government now. It's like there is the executive. The General Assembly is like the parliament, the legislative body. Then we have what we call intergovernmental bodies. Now the intergovernmental bodies help in the various disciplines. We have intergovernmental bodies in education, intergovernmental bodies in science, in natural science, social science, culture, and so on. So these do their work according to what the Secretariat, which is the third organ now, the Secretariat. Now the Secretariat does the day-to-day operations. So decisions by the General Assembly are passed to the Executive Board. Then the Executive Board approves and whatever it does. The Secretariat, which is headed by the Director General, is now the chief, who is the Chief Executive Officer. So all the decisions made are channeled through the intergovernmental bodies for implementation. And then we have also what we call specialized units, specialized programs. For example, you have program in water, program in education, international education, maybe capacity building programs. We have for heritage, when we shall come to that later on the World Heritage Sites. We have also for communication and so on. So the decisions are made and they are passed through there. And now these are the ones which, then we have intergovernmental, I mean the non-governmental organizations, which are now outside governmental arrangement. So the non-governmental organizations also do their business. They enter into agreement with UNESCO and they do specialized functions. And then UNESCO then extends its arm. Professor has just talked about the National Commission in countries, but UNESCO has got regional offices. Like we have now Nairobi, which is overseeing 13 countries, including Uganda. Now that is the structure of extension from Paris as their organ.
So it's all covering and very
all
effective.
Covering and effective.
Professor, let's try now to localize UNESCO to the ordinary person. What are the areas of focus in terms of, we know the core mission of why UNESCO was formed is to ensure there is peace, because that is shortly after the Second World War. And I love the phrase that wars begin in the minds of people. So we should ensure that we create peace in the minds of people. Let's come back home to Uganda as we celebrate these 75 years. What has been UNESCO's role? How can we localize it to the minds of the people in Uganda?
Yeah, let me give a preamble. UNESCO basically is a capacity builder. It is also a laboratory of ideas. And it is a standard setter. It is also a clearing house. So when I come to capacity builder, you ask me, where does it build? Then I go to the major programs of UNESCO to understand what UNESCO has done for Uganda. Is important to recognize the pillars of UNESCO. The first one is education. And UNESCO has done extremely well right from 1963. I'm a witness to this because in 1964 I was in senior 5. I repeat, in 1964 I was in senior 5 at Makerere College School, and the first batch of equipment and materials arrived. And then we set up the best laboratory in the country because that school was attached to the University of East Africa. There was no Makerere University, it was University of East Africa. So already the capacity building in education had started. And then for those who are above 50, you know what we call the Namutamba project. That was set up in education for integrated rural development. And Professor Kajubi, the late Professor Kajubi and others were very instrumental in this. So this was the beginning in capacity building.
In the arena of education.
In the arena of education. Then we have the teacher training across sub-Saharan Africa. This was already teaching. In educational planning, UNESCO has got an international institute in educational planning in Paris. And I can assure you, 90% of education planners in Uganda have gone through that institute. When you come to policies, in 1989, Uganda set up a commission, the Kajubi Commission. I was a member of that commission. And we solicited for support from UNESCO. A UNESCO consultant came here to guide us in policy formulation. That was already moving in. Beginning in 1970 onwards, there was destruction of education infrastructure in this country. And then UNESCO, together with UNDP, they sent in experts and equipment to salvage Makerere. In fact, when I came back from USA in 1975, the engineering or technology faculty was manned by UNESCO experts. Specifically after the murder of Archbishop Rome in 1977, up to 87, that is a decade, that was dominated by professionals living in the country. UNESCO came in handy to fill the vacuum. That is only in education. I haven't talked about other things. So this is as far as it is. Even when we came up to have the policy on science, technology, and innovation, of which also I was a member, UNESCO was called upon. Why? Because it is a standard setter. You can't have a policy of any form without referring it to UNESCO.
Where the standards are really high and of course recommendable. This brings in Doctor. Doctor, when we talk about UNESCO, it is an abbreviation, but that is the United Nations Education, Scientific and Cultural Organization. Let's look at the element of culture, which of course we know a number of heritage sites now are vanishing. And this is also very important, and we know UNESCO has a great impact. We've seen it sometimes when making monetary contributions to some of these heritage sites. 75 years down the road, what can we be proud of as a country where we have a commission of UNESCO?
We have a lot to be proud about. When you look at, in fact, as a country, we need to just gear up our efforts a bit. Because what has happened was that there was a bit of vigilance along the way when these places were nominated. Then, of course, they came the issue of maintenance and then upgrading. And I think that is where we have relaxed a bit. Otherwise, we still have, when you look at the sites, the heritage sites, we have got about 4 categories at the moment. We have the natural ones where there is a windy, for example, impenetrable forest, which combines the natural features plus the indigenous community, the Batwa, who stay there, who also have to be protected and preserved through that arrangement. And then we have got Rwenzori, which also has got a lot of combination of factors. It started as a national park, then we have got features which are unique. You don't get anywhere where you get a tropical mountain, but having glacier and snow on the top is very unique. And then also it has got a mixture of species of animals there. You don't get anywhere. You have chameleons of 3 horns and others which are there. So it has a combination of both natural and cultural value, outstanding. And so it is a natural heritage site. Then you have got our own here, Kasubi tombs, which is also a very important cultural site. Now, when you look at all of these, there are 2 processes. The first process is identification of these sites, which was done well. And then you have got experts carrying the, identifying the outstanding value, which value, by the way, is not only for Uganda. It's a value which anybody in the rest of the world can associate with. And then you find that preservation process. Now, with the case of, for example, Kasubi, just the unfortunate incident we had, but immediately UNESCO mobilized resources And the construction through partnership with Japan has been going on, except of course we have got internal administrative issues which have bogged it down. But as far as UNESCO is concerned, the process is on. Every month, Nairobi, which is the regional office, calls us and they ask for update. And we have a program officer for culture who specifically is attached there every time they have meetings. So there is a lot of work in that. Then we have also about 5 sites which were put since '89 on a tentative list. And UNESCO had already recognized them, starting from Kibiro salt works in Bunyoro, and then we have the Nyero rock paintings in Teso, and then there are other rock paintings in Kenya and Tanzania. They are supposed to be nominated serially together. And then we have got the Bigobia Mugenyi, you must have heard about down the other side, and then Tusi, whatever. So there are about 5 of them. Now the delay is us internally as a country. Because once UNESCO has put it on its tentative list, it's incumbent on the national government, specifically what they call the competent authority. And in our case, the competent authority is the Ministry of Tourism. So the process internally of finishing the nomination papers is not UNESCO. UNESCO just waits to see. But if UNESCO is asked, UNESCO can give technical expert. But you see, because Uganda has to own this, they call it UNESCO site, but the ownership is Uganda, the country. Because the tourism and the value all come to the country. So we have not taken a step as a country so far, from '89 to date, to finish the process of nomination. Right now, to tomorrow, 17th, a new site, Muroto. Muroto is already through the OPM, Office of Prime Minister. The Karamojong people have recommended, and the former minister of OPM, in charge of Karamoja affairs, already worked together with the Catholic Diocese of Muroto and then the University Padua. Already that is already, tomorrow there is a meeting on that process. Now that kind of thing is very good because it came from the local community. The people of Karamoja, they felt Mount Muroto is not just a forest reserve or just a mountain, but it has to be designated by UNESCO. So that is the type of effort which is happening. And then also we have got the Mabira, these were proposed by National Forest Authority, Budongo. The idea is that it gets international branding, which then makes protection very easy and then also attracts international support, where you need not only conservation but education and so on. Then the other thing we haven't mentioned is what we call the intangible cultural heritage. There are what we are naming those are tangible. Physical. But they are intangible, like the songs, the issue of the international, the mother tongue, preservation of the mother tongue. It is another important thing, and UNESCO is very, very, very active in that. And so far,
those must be hard to protect.
Yeah, no, they are. You need to get the people. For example, let me tell you now, there are 6 elements now UNESCO has already inscribed. The pet names, the Empango, you have heard about, of the Banyoro and the Batoro, the Akiki, Amoti. The UNESCO has given enough support already to preserve that because it is disappearing. So people have to get that. So it's inscribed. The Bigwara music of the Basoga, that Goa music, it is already inscribed. There is a musical instrument among the Madi, it is inscribed. And then there is a naming function, naming among the Rangi. The back cloth is also there. Now nobody in the world can prepare anything out of back cloth because it is inscribed as the indigenous intangible cultural value of the Baganda here in Uganda. So even if you are in America and you are found with the back cloth, you can be held to task because it's already inscribed by UNESCO as belonging to the Baganda in Uganda. So those are some of the things, and there are more even is either. So those intangible cultural values are already there. So there are those which are threatened. It's the onus is on us to bring it up and recommend it to UNESCO, and UNESCO will inscribe it there and then it will be associated with the indigenous community. Now, what is the key is that UNESCO, the issue of indigenous communities must be preserved. Marginalized peoples, minorities, and then all languages. This week, UNESCO is going to launch an atlas of international languages. All the languages in the world.
Wow.
UNESCO is launching during the general conference.
Well,
that will be very interesting for you to see how many languages we
how many
have
languages are in the world. This brings me back to Professor. Professor, we've talked about the area of culture, the area of science, the area of education. How do all these fit in the promotion of peace, which was the core mandate of the formulation of UNESCO?
UNESCO is an intellectual organization, but at the same time, it wants to transform the minds. And UNESCO emphasizes education as a transformation agent. It does not look at education in terms of marks, the way we look at it. UNESCO says you need to be transformed. When you are educated, you must have within your hemoglobin those strands of peace. The strand of respect, the strand of dialogue, the strand of withdrawal, conflict resolution. So when we find the two parties fighting, we need to question the basics, the cultural aspect, because that is the root. UNESCO, as says, you must have a culture. Whether you are in New York or London, whatever, your culture is the taproot. So we are saying if you are educated, your education should be manifested in your actions. It is pointless to carry pieces of papers that you've bachelor's or master's or PhD when your actions show the contrary. That is why we emphasize in UNESCO that transformation aspect. And in fact, in education, in UNESCO, there are those phrases like educated fool. They are there. You may be educated, but then you are categorized as a fool. Because you have not, through completeness theorem, you have not completed that humanity. In fact, in UNESCO, when you have an individual minus humanism, you equal to a beast or an animal. So that is why UNESCO touches the mind, okay, the real mind of person. And education should be for transformation. Education should be for skilling. Education should be a change agent. Education should not be just for showing off, that show my certificates. No. This is UNESCO. In fact, if I went much further, UNESCO is ethical in the content because of what happened after during the Second World War. The ethical norms have to be preserved. That's why you preserve this culture. That when you want to do something, you refer back to the culture.
To the culture.
Yeah, that in my culture we don't do this. You see, this is what we are. The ethical norms are always preserved.
Well, this brings me to Dr. Dominic. Many a times you've seen very good programs by UNESCO and of course steered by the Commission home here. But the biggest challenge has been sustainability. I know a number of programs, and I think I was privileged to benefit from some of them under UNESCO, but after a time you ask what really happened, and they'll tell you funding, they'll tell you the resource persons were coming from UNESCO. They cease now to be. How do we ensure there's continuity? How do we empower the local community to ensure that even if it was a period of a year or 2 or 3, and these programs, and very good programs for national development, promoting peace, preserving our heritage and all these, how do we move forward?
Thank you very much. And that now can be understood when we get to the root of the type of support UNESCO gives. There are mainly 3 strands. The first one is the common one, which we call the participation program. Now, the participation program presupposes that the beneficiaries put in something. Roughly about $25,000 or $26,000, around that range. But it's supposed to be for targeted activities which will have impact, which are supposed to be catalytic in nature. Because, and most cases, to approve that, UNESCO has to say, you must prove that this activity has got linkages. But the problem, of course, sometimes some of these activities, people on the paper saw that there will be linkage, but later when they get the money, the support, and the activity, that money goes, you find the linkage is not there, and that's where the problem arises. And there are so many cases. We have had the peace programs, we have got activities for the youth, as you have said correctly. Once the UNESCO fund runs out, you find people wind up. So that means the paperwork that said that there will be that linkage, the linkage was not properly either identified or it was not there in the first place. And the second component is supposed to be those, because they are both 3. One could be from organizations, 2, it could be from government. Like what Professor said, the policy related are supposed to be driven by government. And UNESCO does this just for just to have just like a yeast. So we put you this as a seed money, but you must continue it. Now, I know those in the government, at least they have gone ahead. They find it's transformed something. Now, like the teacher policy, which started small thing was put there. It's now the impact is there. Now the Ministry of Education is restructuring. There is now going to be a National Institute for Teacher Education in Simoni, like a university now. Actually, what we lost through Chiambogo. You remember Chiambogo used to produce teachers purely, nothing else. And the teachers there were more valued than the ones from Makerere. But when Chiambogo became a university and merged in so many things, we lost that out. So we are going back to that through UNESCO's direction and support. And the initial capital was put there. Now the rest of it, it's the government's responsibility to put it on the budget and to continue. So those are the participatory projects. They are like that. So when you find a project that stopped, it could have been a participation project where the community or the beneficiaries did not put in the matching grant which will continue it. Then the second one we have are those which we call from these ones we get a small funding from the from the region here, from what they call the regular budget and all of that. Some of them are through support from other countries, and then they come. The regional office distributes it to the region. Now, most of those are small funds, less than the amount I mentioned earlier. Now, again, these ones also depends on the beneficiary, the people who receive it. But I know there is a company, there is now a youth group called Faraja Africa. These people got that thing, and now the young man has put up a big organization. Now he's an employer. But he started just as a small youth project. I can so tell you the community media centers, you must have heard about them. Nakaseke is very famous. There are 5 of them. But of the 5, I think it's in Nakaseke and about 3 others. There's one in Apache, and then the one in Kumi is also not so good. But the Nakaseke one is a good case example we always saw. That group really needed it. Once the UNESCO helped them and the radio station was installed, it has been serving as the only means of communication for the farmers, for the local people, and so on. I don't know whether you are aware of the Nakaseke thing. It has been maintained, and that is a very good case, best practice of what the UNESCO's project is supposed to be. So the catalytic impact is being felt because it is there. And that guy there, any small thing you find, sometimes you get information. UCC sometimes threaten them because of the frequency or whatever. He quickly runs to us. And then we engage into dialogue and we get that. So that is the type of project. Then we have got the extra budgetary one. Now that one is big normally. It lasts, and most of it really should have an impact. Like we had these other funds for in trust, they come like the funds in trust, the Chinese funds trust, for example, which has been used to establish ICT hubs. Yesterday we are opening another training for all teachers now, the teacher training colleges, to become ICT compliant and start online teaching in their schools. Now, because UNESCO had already put enough facilities in Simoni, Simoni is now an ICT hub.
Wow.
And so we have Simoni, and then we have also facilities in Abilon, which is a national institute for tutors, trainers for BTVET. People who did technicians. All tutors or technicians are trained in Abilon, somewhere in a college. So again, that is a hub. It has a hub there. So there are 6 hubs of ICT. But all the people who are managing them are right now in Simoni. They will be there up to Friday. And they are being trained. We got the ICT trainers.
That is a bit of sustainability.
Exactly.
Definitely.
So we already established the sustainability. So in other words, what I'm trying to bring, we have already noticed some of those gaps. And now we are trying to make sure there are linkages. So in most of the projects we have started now, from after observing that weaknesses, we have become a bit also very critical in analysis and ensuring that it is there. And when it comes to be one-off, there must be a linkage so that it continues. So it's already being addressed.
Okay. Well, that will bring me to Professor. Professor, 75 years of UNESCO, and of course in Uganda, we look at that briefly after our independence. That's when we had the commission established. What have been the outstanding challenges for this body in smooth operation, in ensuring improvement in education, in culture, in science, in all these 5 values?
National commissions were started all over in ministries of education. But over time, some countries upgraded them to semi-autonomous bodies. And indeed, the Uganda National Commission, because of its activities and coverage, came up with an act which was ratified by Parliament in 2014, making it a semi-autonomous body. What would that mean? It means that it would be at the same level like UNEB. It would have a separate, its own budget. Okay? But unfortunately at the moment, we have not attained that semi-autonomous. So from the policy level, governance level, that has been a challenge. The other challenge is the confusion people have that UNESCO is a funding agent. We are not IMF. We are not World Bank. We are not UNICEF. We are a laboratory of ideas. We catalyze you in order for you to continue on your own.
I love the word catalyst. That reminds me of my chemistry.
Exactly.
That quickens the chemical reaction.
The chemical reaction, like when you are preparing oxygen, isn't it? Yes. But here, people think that when we put in seed money, UNESCO should continue on and on.
Yes.
This issue of depending on, that syndrome. So that is a major challenge, which is also cultural. That when I support you, I must continue supporting you. No, that is a challenge, okay? Yes, maybe I'll stop.
Okay, well, I want to thank you so much, Doctor, and of course, Professor. But I just want to give each one of you a minute as we wind up your final remarks as we celebrate 75 years of existence of UNESCO. Beginning with you, Professor.
I want to give you four issues of UNESCO UNESCO wants you to learn to be, learning to be, to anchor yourself. Otherwise, globalization will take you. And learning to know. Too much information. You must learn to know. The third one is learning to do. After you've known, you must do. That is the skilling component. Learning to learn is lifelong learning. Even at my age, I'm learning. And also learning to live together. That is a nutshell this century's norm. Those are the 5 pillars of UNESCO in the 21st century.
I want to thank you, Professor. Finally, Doctor, your final remarks.
Yes, I want to thank you for hosting us, and I want to thank the viewers and listeners out there. These are the key things that we should take from this. 75 years is what they call platinum period, and it's not a simple year. So we'll urge everybody to reflect in your schools, in the educational sector, in the all what we have enumerated here, in the science sector, in the issues of the ecological management, the biodiversity, environment, UNESCO sites, and then also in issues of water, in issues of disaster management, where UNESCO has gone into, try to reflect on that. In the social sciences, in the areas of heritage, in the issues of human rights, in issues of societal transformation, peace building, intercultural dialogue, and a culture of peace and non-violence. In the issue of culture, the heritage sites we have and the cultural institutions, the values that we have around, try to reflect on those and try to see what we can do. And finally, in terms of press freedom, safety of journalists, and the activities in that regard. Once you reflect on this, then you'll be able to make a decision and to get a recommitment to work together with UNESCO, to work together with the National Commission for UNESCO, so that we have a better future for the country. Thank you very much.
Well, I want to thank you so much. That is Dr. Dominic Mundurugo Ago Lalali, thank you so much, who is the Assistant Secretary General of, that is the UNESCO Commission in Uganda. But also I want to thank Professor, that is Eliabu Rugojo, for finding time, also being with us as we celebrate 75 years of existence of UNESCO. Coexistence, putting together peace, and of course continuity in learning. Well, I'll have a commercial break and I'll return shortly. Keep it with us on UBC TV.
Live